The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
This is a French chocolate mousse, mousseline au chocolat, one of the most delicious desserts you can imagine. We're making it today on the French Chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. Today we're making one of the loveliest kinds of French desserts. I don't say that it's a no-cal dessert because it's made with egg yolks and cream and butter and beaten egg whites. But it's a light and lovely one. That's why it's called a mousseline. Mousse means foamy, and mousseline means even more light and foamy. And how it is made is with egg yolks and sugar, which are beaten over hot water with orange liqueur, and then butter is beaten into that, and then egg whites are folded in, and that's all there is to it. And you'll see it's very quickly made and is just delicious. We have in here 4 egg yolks, and I'm going to add 3/4 cup of sugar. I'm using this instant or super fine sugar because you want to be sure that the sugar melts. That you can find in almost any supermarket. Several of the big sugar companies put it out, and just look for instant or super fine granulated. That just gets beaten around till it gets a little bit thick, and then we're going to put in 1/4 cup of orange liqueur. Now, if you're going to use any kind of liqueurs or rums in cooking, particularly desserts, use a very good quality of it, because if they're bad, it's terrible. And so if you're going to use them, you have to spend the money. Otherwise, you can just use orange juice, or you can use rum, or you could use strong coffee. And now these are going to be beaten over hot water until they become thick. This is rather like making a hollandaise sauce, where you start out with egg yolks and beat them until they're warm. And quite a few French desserts start this way. And the reason you want them to thicken up is because you want the mousse to hold its shape. And as with egg yolks, you have to be careful that you don't heat them over direct flame, because then they might curdle into scrambled eggs. And this takes about 3 or 4 minutes, and you don't have to beat hard, you just stir them. If you were making a zabaglione, you do it just the same way, but you use whole eggs and sugar and marsala wine. But when you have whole eggs, of course, it gets foamy. In this instance, it just thickens as though it were like a mayonnaise. And also, if you were making a Genoise cake, which is one of the very fine French butter cakes, you start out with whole eggs and sugar and just beat them until they're thick. You can keep changing hands and doing whatever you like. When you make hollandaise, of course, it's very much the same way, because you don't have any sugar, but you have egg yolks and you have a little liquid, and it's the same system of just beating until they slowly thicken into a cream. It wouldn't be any sense in beating these with an electric beater, because you couldn't get the water hot enough. Now, while I'm letting that thicken, I'm going to melt the chocolate for it. I can beat this with one hand and put the chocolate in. Also, I've got 1 cup of chocolate bits. That's 6 ounces. I frankly like the chocolate bits because they melt much more quickly. As you see, you can do things together, both stirring with one hand and beating with the other. And I'm melting this in 4 tablespoons of very strong coffee. I've used 4 tablespoons of water, and then 2 tablespoons of instant coffee, and that makes a good strong mixture. I'm going to take that off the heat a little bit because the water is boiling a little too hard. Then I'll go back to my chocolate. And when you're melting chocolate, you want to be very careful that you that you melt it just over water that's hot and not actually boiling. And once it starts melting like that, you can just take it off the water and just let it sit for a minute. There, we'll go back to our egg yolks. As you can see, it's thickening up a little bit. And now it's about the consistency of a mayonnaise. Can you see? See that hole slightly in the wires of the whip. So we take it off the water, and then we have to beat it until it's cold and makes the ribbon. And I'm going to beat it in a bowl of ice because it's a little quicker. You just get it started that way, and then we can go on to the rest of our mousse. I'll just put that to the side for a minute. And we don't need our boiling water over here anymore. And just take a look at our chocolate. I think I had the coffee in there so long that I think that some of the water evaporated, so I'm just putting in a tablespoon of water there and just take a look at it every now and then. And now we're going to have butter, and this is a stick and a half of unsalted butter, and we want to cream it. And the easiest way to do it is just in the machine like that. And then we go back to our coffee. To our chocolate. Now, one of the most important things in the melting of the chocolate is that you just stand over it, and it should be an absolutely perfectly smooth mass. And if you melt it over too hot water, I'm going to put in a little bit more water in, another tablespoon. If the water is too hot, the chocolate turns grainy. And particularly in a dessert like a mousse, it has to be very carefully melted so that it's a smooth and velvety consistency. See, that's coming. Now I can heat that water just a little bit more. But you'll often notice if you try to melt chocolate in a hurry that it becomes grainy and a dark color. There, now that's nicely melted. And it hasn't turned dark either, which is important. And so we simply pour the chocolate into the butter. You want to make sure that all the chocolate and the butter get thoroughly blended. The reason we're using butter in this is because when the mousse is chilled in the refrigerator, the butter gives it body. You'd either use butter or you'd use whipped cream, and in this case the butter gives a lovely and different taste to it. And you want to be sure when you're doing this part that you get all the pieces of butter and the chocolate intimately blended. And just, if you see any little pieces of yellow butter there, you know that you haven't blended it quite enough. There. And then we see how this has gotten. Let's beat it up a little bit more. That's still too warm. You can tell also whether you've gotten it hot enough over your hot water here by sticking your finger in it. And if the mixture is too hot for your finger, then it's done. But particularly if you want to unmold your mousse, you want to be sure that it is thick enough. Now see, that's thick, and that's forming a ribbon. When it falls off the whip like that, you can see that it forms a little bit of a ribbon down on the surface of the mixture. So that is now ready to go in to our chocolate mixture. Oh, The pie plate's stuck on there. There. Now, when that's thoroughly mixed up, all we have to do is to add our egg whites to it. Just take those off and put them away. Now we have our egg whites to beat. And as usual, I'm going to beat them by hand with this big wire whip. This is about 5.5 to 6 inches across. And this is an unlined copper bowl, which is about 10 inches across. I find that it does such a good job that I really never use anything else. The principle is that you get as much air into the egg whites as possible. And having a large whip in a relatively small bowl, it goes much more quickly. Then after the egg whites have begun to foam, you add just a little pinch of salt. And that, with the copper, makes an acid which is a stabilizer. Which means stabilizing means that after you've beaten the egg whites, they don't break down into granules and get sort of watery. Now, if you're doing this by machine, I recommend that you hand hold the electric beater and circulate it around so that you get as much air in as possible. Some electric beaters have a beater that circulates, and in that case it's fine. And as a stabilizer, you can add, well, we've got 4 egg whites here, and you would add a scant 1/4 teaspoonful of cream of tartar. Now, I want to see if they're done. They're holding in the whip, but they don't still quite have that little point we want. But we can add now some sugar, which will also help make them stiff. I'll put in 2 tablespoons of this instant superfine sugar again. Now that's almost ready. We're looking for that little bit that holds up. There. See, we have that little point that goes over like that, so they're all ready. Now, you see this mousse really goes very quickly. And then we're going to do that old folding technique, which we've done several times before, but it's always good to see it again. You put in about a third or about a fourth of the egg whites and stir it in so it's thoroughly blended. And then you put the rest of the egg whites on top. This business of folding is you just run into continually when you're making desserts and cakes. Now hold your rubber spatula like that, and it's going to come down into the edge and up. And every time it does that, it brings a little bit of the bottom up over the egg whites. See, like that. Then keep turning your bowl. There. And you do it rapidly. And you can see when that goes down, up, see a little bit of that comes up over. But the idea is to fold so that you don't deflate your egg whites. That's why it's so important and why you always hear so much about it. And then get down in there so that you have all of the bits of chocolate up. There. And now we're going to mold it. You've seen it already molded, but I'll show you what you can serve it in. You can either serve it in little individual glass dishes like this or in a mold, and we have enough here so that I can put some in each. See, that's the egg whites make it so light and nice. There. And try and put it in as neatly as possible so that you don't get any chocolate on the edge of the cup. It's usually best when you're doing this to put it down from the tip of the spoon that way. And now in the bowl, now if you want to mold it, which as you saw at the beginning, and I'm going to bring out our molded one again, it's a little bit hard to get it unmolded because it's rather sticky stuff. I find the best way to do if you want it molded is to put it in the mold and then freeze it, because you can freeze this mousse just as well as not. And now it's going to go into the ice box, the refrigerator. I always say ice box because I was out of generation before we had electric ones. And this should chill 2 or 3 hours, or you can make it you can make it a day or two ahead of time, or you can freeze it. Now here's the molded one that we saw, and I'm also going to make some whipped cream. But before I do the whipped cream, I'm going to read you out the ingredients, because even if you've been taking notes, it's rather hard to follow how they go. Now first, you melt 1 cup of chocolate bits with 4 tablespoons of strong coffee and set aside. Then beat to the ribbon 4 egg yolks, 3/4 cup instant sugar, add 1/4 cup liqueur, or you can use strong coffee or orange juice. Then beat over warm water till warm and foamy. Then beat over cold water till cool. And as you remember, that was about the consistency of mayonnaise. And then beat 6 ounces of unsalted butter into the melted chocolate, or vice versa. We did this in the machine. And then beat in the egg yolk mixture. In other words, combine them all. And then beat egg whites till stiff, 4 egg whites. Stir 1/4 into the chocolate mixture. Fold in the rest. And then you chill for several hours. And now I'm going to show you how to make French type whipped cream, which is called Chantilly. And the whipped cream is very much like the egg whites, in which you want to beat as much air as possible into it. And it's not beaten terribly stiff, it's beaten so it's sort of rather light, and the beater leaves traces on the cream. And if you're going to beat cream, be sure that you have your beater and your bowl and your cream thoroughly chilled. And if it's in a hot day, you might even beat over a bowl of ice. I'm using a very heavy cream here, which beats up quite quickly. If you use that all-purpose cream, it'll take you a little bit longer, and it's better if you beat it over ice. So you just beat just like that. And if everything is thoroughly chilled, it won't take you more than about 2 minutes. The all-purpose cream usually takes about 4 or 5 minutes unless you beat it over ice. So you don't have to beat very hard. And if you want to beat with an electric mixer, hold the electric mixer by hand and circulate it around. An electric blender is just awful because it makes terribly stiff cream. And what we want is this lovely light type. that's beginning to thicken up now. There. It's not quite, see, it's quite thick now, but the beater isn't leaving traces on it. If you've never had cream this way, I think you'll enjoy it because it, I don't know, it's sort of softer and velvetier. Now that's almost right. You see, when you move your beater on, it almost leaves little traces, but not quite. And of course, if you overbeat, you turn into butter. There. Now that's called Chantilly, or lightly whipped cream. As you see, when you lift it, it just leaves a little bit of a shape. You can go a little bit farther than that. And if you're making a Bavarian cream, that's the dessert that has gelatin in it. And you cool the gelatin and then fold the whipped cream in. And you don't want very, very stiff whipped cream, or you'll have a stiff Bavarian cream. And now to flavor it, use powdered sugar. And you always have to sift it because it has little lumps in. I'm going to sift in about 2 tablespoons. I had about a half pint of cream. And then just stir it up. Then you can put vanilla or any other flavoring you want. I'm going to put in some more of this orange liqueur. It's very good with brandy or with kirsch, whatever you like. Vanilla is also fine. Then just beat it up enough so it's all mixed, and then taste it and see if you've got enough liqueur in. Very good. If you have too much liqueur in, then it becomes watery. And now you can beat your cream ahead of time. And if you do, you just put it into a sieve lined with wet cheesecloth over a bowl. And you can do this, heavens, even a day ahead of time. And as the cream sits, there's always a little bit of liquid that seeps down into the bowl. There, and then you just will cover that up and put it back into the refrigerator, and then you can use it whenever you want. So we're going to use it right now, so I'll put it into our chocolate mousse. Now you can serve the chocolate mousse just as it is without any cream, but it's sort of nice with cream. And particularly this very light cream. Now this kind of cream you can sometimes decorate with whipped cream. In that case, you would have to beat a little harder until it's a little bit of stiffer, and then you can put it into a pastry bag and make designs on it. But because you get the designs, you don't have this lovely light quality of the cream. There. And now, as a final decoration, we will grate a little bit of chocolate on. These little graters are awfully useful for cheese or chocolate or anything else. Oh, I think I'd better, yep. That just grates on. There. Oh, I got a little bit too much on there. There. Now, as you see, we've done that in just about 15 minutes. And there isn't anything difficult about it. The only slightly tricky thing is the beating of the egg yolks and sugar over hot water. And in that, you have to count on about 4 or 5 minutes. And remember that the water is almost or not quite simmering, and then you keep beating it rather slowly until it thickens up into very much like a mayonnaise. And if you want to put this into a mold, this was a regular 6-cup ring mold, you wet the mold and then you spoon your mousse into it, cover it with wax paper, and then put it in the freezer. And the frozen mousse is just as good as the chilled mousse. In fact, well, it always, because of the egg whites, it doesn't become thick and stiff. That keeps it very nicely. So, This makes about 5 to 6 cups and serves, well, it depends on what you've had for the rest of your meal. It really will serve about 8 people. So we're now ready to serve it. There. I think I will cut a piece of it so you can see how it looks. There. It's really one of the nicest mousses I know. But as it is a fairly rich one, as you can see with all of that butter and then with the cream, you would be very wise to serve a fairly simple main course, such as a roast chicken. You remember the roast chicken we did in one of our early shows, or a roast lamb or broiled chicken, something like that, which isn't too heavy. And with it, we're serving a chilled Sauterne wine, which is one of the noble wines of France and goes perfectly beautifully with any kind of a dessert. It's a sweet wine, but it has so much body to it that it doesn't seem sweet, and it's a wonderful thing to drink with either cake or a mousse like this. Now next time we're going to do a glamorous meat pâté. It's sort of like a French meatloaf, and you can use it for a first course or on a buffet, and it's wonderful with summer meals. And I think you'll enjoy very much seeing that. Now, I wonder if there's anything else I haven't told you about this chocolate mousse. You have had the ingredients, and you remember about beating the egg yolks over and sugar over hot water. And remember that trick about sticking your finger into the yolk mixture. When it's too hot for your finger, it's done. Well, I think that's just about all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit and enjoy your mousse.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking. The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.